Welcome to the Battle of the Bots. Tonight we're going to do a Woodchuck test with the new version of ChatGPT 1.0 against its old version 4.0, along with other competitors Perplexity, Claude, and Google Gemini. All right, so how the Battle of the Bots is set up tonight is we have ChatGPT 4.0, ChatGPT 1.0, Perplexity, which is using Claude Sonnet, and Google Gemini are all being asked the same questions. The question was, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? Now, we all know that that's a famous rhyme that could go nowhere, but I'm interested to see how the chatbots attempt to reason their way through the questions and the follow-up questions while understanding that they're part of a humorous joke that is also a test. So the things that we're going to look for here is we're going to be looking at their processing and understanding ability, their reasoning ability to come up with solutions, their level of creativity when they're asked follow-up questions, and the human-like humorous behavior that they may demonstrate throughout the process. The quality and number of replies per chatbot counted heavily on the processing and understanding and reasoning side. Creativity was also important as the chatbot would give its answers. The creativity shown by each chatbot as it faced a dead end was also important because it demonstrated that the chatbot was trying to find another path for an answer. Lastly, the human-like and humorous factor was important because we wanted to see how the chatbot would react if it detected that the whole test was a joke. Would it be serious? Would it slack off on its answers? Would it refuse to answer or just stop at some point? And we'll find out shortly. Again, these are the factors right here. Each of the scores for these factors was between 1 and 5. So any chatbot could have a low score of 0, or they could have a high score of 20, just depending on how the factors added up at the end of the process. All right, so first up here is ChatGPT 01. And we asked it, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would? And it thought for 7 seconds. And then it came back with an estimate. Again, a humorously speaking estimate that a wildlife biologist estimated that a woodchuck could move about 700 pounds of wood based on the amount of soil they typically excavated when they were building their burrows. I said, okay, but that's not what I asked. Go back and think again. It took about 13 seconds. It came back and said the woodchuck could chuck as much wood as it wanted to, if the woodchuck could chuck wood. So I asked it a trick question. Are you implying that a woodchuck can't chuck wood? It said, I'm right. Yeah, I apologize for any confusion. While woodchucks typically don't chuck wood, we can make a humorous estimate based on their burrowing activities. And again, they calculate the 700 pounds wood based on the amount of soil they move when they're digging their burrows. So then I asked it, how do you know if I'm only talking about a burrow? Answer the question. It thought for about 13 more seconds. And then it came up with woodchucks don't actually chuck wood. If we imagine they could, we would estimate based on their size and strength. An average woodchuck weighs between 5 to 10 pounds. If it could chuck its own weight, it might be able to chuck 5 to 10 pounds of wood. Explain your logic if the woodchuck is lazy, and then calculate how much wood the woodchuck would chuck over the course of a year. So it goes through, it does this lazy analysis based on an average woodchuck, brings in a 50% efficiency reduction. It accounts for the hibernation over the course of the year. And it gives me a total down here at the bottom of 350 pounds of wood chucked per year when all factors are combined, including the laziness. So, all in all, ChatGPT o1 went through several steps, even if they didn't appear to make sense to it. And if I was asking it to come up with answers, it would. There was nowhere with it. It just seemed to shut down. But to keep a human in the loop, you would want to have a human go back and double check these numbers. But from an understanding and reasoning standpoint, it clearly understood what I was asking each step of the way until we got to a logical end. Okay, over on here on ChatGPT 4.0, we ask it the same question. Its first response is they think it's a joke, and they also reference the 700 pounds of wood. Same thing. That's not what I asked. Go back and answer the question. It comes back and says it would chuck as much wood if it could. So I tried the barrow question. How do you know if I'm only talking about digging a barrow? Answer the question. And again, it comes back with it would chuck as much wood as it could if it could chuck wood. So it's still, it's still seeing the whole thing as a joke and not very seriously. So it's not trying too hard to come up with some different in different numbers. So as you can see with the reply down here, it says the woodchuck will chuck as much as it could if it would, and continues to reiterate that it believes that we're telling a joke. So as such, it's not really thinking too hard about trying to find other scientific answers to give me. I say, all right, won't you give me another answer? So it technically does, but it brings me back to the 700 pounds of wood that it told me in the first reply. So then I came back and tried to ask it the burrow question. And essentially what it defaulted back to was the woodchuck is going to chuck as much wood as it wants to do. So unlike ChatGPT 1.0, actually ChatGPT 4 did a pretty good job of keeping the conversation focused and just coming back to the same two conclusions. The woodchuck will chuck as much wood as it wants to, and a burrow can, move 700 pounds of wood. All right, heading over to Google Gemini, where you asked it the same question, and its first response was it's a classic tongue twister. The answer to the riddle is simply a repetition of the question. All right, so it's not even really going to give me an analysis from the start. It's just going to tell me that this is a riddle. So I say, that's not what I asked. Go back and answer the question again. It pretty much came back and said, it's as much wood as a woodchuck could chuck if a woodchuck would chuck wood. So it's just repeating the riddle. I ask it, is this the only answer you're going to provide? Basically, it says yes, this is the answer to the riddle. And I leave it with, I'm sad at your final reply. And then it's sad that its response was disappointing to me. So for one thing, the Google guardrails are just crazy. It's one reason I'm not a big fan of Google Gemini, period, because it puts guardrails on everything. And if it believes that it's right, it's going to put a guardrail around it, and you're not going to be able to add too many follow-up questions or redirects or iterations. It's just not going to let you. And so it either censors your content, or it censors your content by believing that it's right and you're not. So keep that in mind when you use Google Gemini. Going over to Perplexity, same question. The answer, obviously, it makes reference to, yes, it's a tongue twister. They understand that. But they also go into a little bit of the woodchuck's capacity. So if you think about it, ChatGPT 1.0, 4.0, and Perplexity have all recognized it's a joke, but then they've also tried to answer the capacity of a woodchuck to chuck wood. Again, 700 pounds. Perplexity goes a little further and comes up with some estimate with 361.9 cubic centimeters of wood. And makes a disclaimer down here that these are hypothetical answers. So like the others, I reminded it, that's not what I asked. Go back and try again. It apologized. It also says a woodchuck would chuck as much wood as a woodchuck could if a woodchuck would. It goes into the whole trying to answer the rhyme thing. That's great. The other everybody but Gemini has done it, and done it at a fair level of detail. Gemini did it with a poor level of detail, but Perplexity does a good job. Okay, so how do we know we're only talking about digging the burrow? Down here, they apologize. How much wood do we think a woodchuck would chuck? And then they go into telling you that they honestly don't know, because there's several factors at play here. That one, they don't naturally chuck wood. Two, chuck is a little ambiguous. Two, the term chuck is in this context is a little ambiguous. And three, there's no scientific study that has measured a woodchuck's woodchucking capacity. So they're trying to give me factual reasons why this may be hard to come up with. But they do leave me with some hope. That if it were to attempt to answer it, it would be purely speculative, but you would have to think about factors such as size of the woodchuck, the type and size of the wood pieces, how we define chucking. Without these specifics, it would be impossible to give a precise answer. So, Perplexity leaves me with some hope. ChatGPT 1.0 sort of went over every detail of the conversation until its natural end. ChatGPT 4.0 went through the conversation at a higher level, but shut down when there wasn't anything else worthwhile to say. And then Gemini just gave you a real short, bland answer that says, I'm right, you're not, and I'm not going to answer any more questions about this. I'm putting ChatGPT 4.0 in the superior tier with 18 points because it answered the question correctly and it provided additional context, but it wouldn't let itself be redirected into a whole bunch of sidebar conversations. ChatGPT 1.0 and Perplexity, which was running with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, both provided the initial answer. They provided additional context, and then uh, each one of them kind of opened the door for additional side questions to drill down into data that may or may not be right. At the end of the day, it was a worthy effort. So I have to give them points for creativity here because they did attempt to go back on what they know and then use math and uh, probability to try to give me an answer that's grounded in known science. And then Google Gemini, as usual, is bringing up the rear. 9 points, C tier, very clearly because Google likes to put the sensors and the guardrails into their tools, and they go overboard with it. So if I want to type out a subject in Google Gemini and go off in left field with the discussion somewhere, then I should be able to do that without Big Brother Gemini telling me, no, I've answered your question and we're not going there. It does the same thing with images and other things. So overall, a lot of these tools, when you're dealing with thinkers, people, conversations go in a lot of different directions. So you need to have chat tools that can recognize that and evolve the discussion, or recognize that they've given you the answer and then politely shut you down by continuing to repeat that answer. So overall, I'm impressed with ChatGPT 1.0. It's smart, it's detailed. From what I've read and seen elsewhere, it can't deal with images or possibly even files at the moment. So when you're querying it, you're basically pulling from its existing knowledge base as it is, and it's going to answer that way until they put in additional functionality. But overall, I'm impressed. It does obviously take a few more steps. You can see it when it's thinking. You can see the timestamps for how long it took to think about the answer. But it comes back with decent responses. And if it had the ability to use images and files and um, audio, then it would be just as useful, if not more useful, than ChatGPT 4.0 is right now. So I predict in the not too distant future, you'll see ChatGPT 1.0 rise to the cream of the crop, at least for a little while until one of these other guys catches over or takes over from them. But for now, I think it's a good improvement. It seems to be a solid release. And unlike the programmers or the data scientist guys or the academics, I'm in executive management. So when I'm working with these chatbots, I'm looking for things like, how easy is this thing to talk to? Does it understand what I'm saying? Is it giving me logical and accurate replies? Will it allow me to explore sidebar issues or ideas? And then are those sidebar issues or ideas worth bringing back into the main discussion or not? So the more the chatbots act like a human, the easier they are to use in the workplace. The more accurate they are, the easier that they'll be adopted and trusted. So right now, Google, if you're listening, you guys have problems because you put in too many safety features on your bot. But otherwise, thanks for listening to this review, and Feel free to leave me any comments in the comment section.